Well, guys, it's pretty simple. In this video, I'm going to be taking some of your hot takes from my comment section that I did on a post and then give my reactions to your hot takes. This isn't a brand new idea. This isn't some genius idea that I came up with, but I wanted to do it because I felt like, why not? If my voice sounds different to you, it's probably because I have a new computer, and this is the first video that I'm using on my MacBook Pro. I had a MacBook Air before, but you don't really care about any of that. So let's just get to your hot takes and let's see what I felt about them right after this.
Before I begin, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, DraftKings. Basketball fans, we've seen it all this season. Rookies rising to the top, legends leaving their legacy on the court, and there are just a few weeks left to get in on the action. Right now, you can get in on the action with DraftKings Pick6, a brand new way to play daily fantasy sports. All new customers who play $5 will get $50 in Pick6 credits. Getting started is simple. All you got to do is download the DraftKings Pick6 app and sign up with code BARRY. Pick at least 2 players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. Like, will they score more or less than 30 points, have more or less than 8 assists, or more or less than 10 rebounds? You get the idea. Lock them in and compete against others for a shot at huge cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Pick6 app now and sign up with code BARRY only on DraftKings Pick6. Once again, download the DraftKings Pick6 app now and sign up with code BARRY only on DraftKings Pick6. The crown is yours.
Starting off with, Barry secretly has a crippling marijuana addiction and his dealer is Tom Brady. That is categorically false on both counts. I do not have a marijuana addiction. In fact, I don't even like marijuana, but I cannot speak for Tom Brady as to whether or not he does or does not deal marijuana. I wouldn't put it past him, knowing because he's a stupid cheater, but I think just the mere thought of me having a marijuana addiction is just disgusting to think about. So no, I do not agree with that hot take at all. Thanksgiving is the best holiday. I disagree with this so violently because to me, Thanksgiving is actually the worst holiday. I would say that Halloween is by far the best holiday, and let me tell you why. Because Halloween, and I might have said this before in a prior video sometime, I don't really give a shit. I'm about to rant anyway. Halloween changes with you as you get older. When you're a kid, Halloween's great because you get candy, you get to dress up in costumes, scary costumes, go around your neighborhood, get candy, whatever. Then as you get older, Halloween becomes less about candy and dresses and becomes more about knocking boots, you know what I'm talking about? You go out, you can party. So there's Halloween for kids, Halloween for adults. Thanksgiving is just kind of like you're sitting at a table and you're talking with your relatives, which is, I mean, we all love our relatives, but at the same time, it's a little bit boring, and food is okay. I don't think it's bad, but I still think also that it's nowhere near as good as Christmas is when you're a kid. The only thing I would say Thanksgiving is better than is Christmas when you're an adult, because when you're an adult, Christmas time is about buying things for people, and there's really, I mean, as you get older, Christmas gets worse. So I would say Thanksgiving is towards the bottom of the big three when you talk about holidays. So I disagree with that, in case you couldn't tell. The only major U.S. sport in which postseason success should have any bearing on evaluating a player's career is basketball. Playoff success of football, hockey, and baseball especially is entirely dictated by the team and can't be put onto any single player the way a basketball team can be carried by a single player. I agree and I don't agree. I think that of all of those sports you listed, I think that basketball, you can have one player take a team the farthest. Still, even when it comes to basketball, you need teammates who are competent, and believe me, as a LeBron fan, I've seen too many times where he's been amazing and his teammates were just so fucking incompetent that they let him down. I mean, you can talk about game 1 of the finals versus the Warriors if you want. You talk about so many different series where his teammates didn't shoot the ball well. Even just this past season versus Denver, LeBron was great, and he's at 39 years old. He's in his 21st season, and his teammates shot 28% from 3. So even in basketball, you can have a great player, and I know he had Anthony Davis as well, but if your role players don't show up, even in basketball, you're not going to do anything. I don't really watch hockey, but I know that best players only really play like a third of the game, a little bit over a third of the game, which is pretty weak, to be honest. So I guess that's why hockey fans aren't as big into rings and shit. Like Wayne Gretzky has 4 rings, but nobody ever calls him a loser the way basketball fans call LeBron a loser. Football, it's really only for quarterbacks, I feel like. For like wide receivers and stuff and running backs, nobody really seems to care about the postseason. Quarterbacks, I do think the postseason does matter to an extent. I think that because all of the best quarterbacks, like the very, very best quarterbacks of all time, the one thing they have in common is consistent postseason success, and I don't think that's an accident. At the same time, I do think that you don't want to put too much stock into it because there are some, unlike basketball and baseball and other sports, as you said, you know, there's best of 5 and best of 7. Football is single elimination, so you can get teams who just on any given day can have a better day and that's it, and whoop-de-doo. But I would say overall, while I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I do think that the playoffs do matter for quarterbacks. I used to be one of those guys that, but it's more so about how does the quarterback perform, in my opinion, than team success. Because there's plenty of quarterbacks that actually don't perform that poorly, but they don't have a lot of team success. And there's also other quarterbacks who they had terrible playoff performances and still had pretty relatively successful playoff careers, such as like a Drew Bledsoe, for example, if you want to look up his numbers. But anyway, I've gone on too far with this one. Moving on. John Stockton is the GOAT point guard, and I will die on this hill. Well, you better get comfortable on top of that hill and dying, because he's not better than Magic Johnson. He's not better than Steph Curry. I don't think he's better than Chris Paul even. John Stockton was he was inhumanly consistent in terms of his durability and in terms of his production. He never had, in any year of his career, he played for 19 years, he never had a single dominant, well, no, I shouldn't say that, but he didn't have a single year where it was like that stood out more than the others. So he was consistently putting up these numbers, but it was at like the same pace the entire time, and he never really rose to the same level as guys like Magic. And if you're going to talk about Steph, my other thing about Stockton is that he simply didn't score enough to be the best point guard. And I understand that point guard, you're supposed to distribute the ball and get people involved. I get this, but he played nearly 1,700 games. Didn't score over 34 points in a game one fucking time. He had double-digit rebounds in a game once in nearly 1,700 games. Okay, so the guy literally, again, I know he was a point guard. I know that point guards are supposed to be passing, but he was somewhat limited in what you could ask him to do, or at the very least, what he tried to do. He didn't really try to score. He lost 19 different playoff series, including 18 different playoff series with Karl Malone. So his numbers in the playoffs get worse than they are in the regular season. He's one of the best point guards of all time, but he's not the best point guard of all time. Get the fuck out of here. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is one of the best in the franchise. I disagree heavily. I think Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is one of the worst movies ever made, and I've probably said this. I have actually a video, I think, ranking all the Halloween movies, and it's down near the bottom for me. I don't know if it's as bad as Halloween Ends and Halloween Resurrection, but it might be the worst besides those two. There's a fucking white horse, and Michael is this hillbilly. He's a hobo now, and he has a beard. He doesn't even wear, he has a mask, but the mask is like half torn off so you can see his face. And the worst part of the entire movie is that they have Michael actually talk at the end. He says die for stabbing, I think, Dr. Loomis was. I don't remember. It was such a shitty movie. I only saw it like once or twice. I have absolutely no desire to rewatch it again, but it was a terrible movie, and I think you, sir, should be ashamed for thinking otherwise. Tony Romo and Joe Buck are both outstanding at their job. Joe gets unfairly criticized because he's not his dad, and Tony because he's still as passionate about the sport as he was when he was playing it. I never really understood the Joe Buck hate. I understand that I think the Randy Moss mooning situation made him look like a prude, and a lot of people said, oh, this guy, he's just a rich, white, out-of-touch guy who's a nepo baby, you know what I mean? But I never really understood. I never had a problem with Joe Buck as an announcer, so I have no problem with him. I think the tide's starting to turn with him overall because he's starting to grow on more people. I think him going on Pardon My Take a couple years back and showing he had some personality was good with it. As for Tony Romo, again, I've never really had a problem with him as an announcer, except for when he'd be announcing Tom Brady games and he'd almost go overboard to slurp Brady. That would always piss me off. But other than that, I don't mind Tony Romo. I don't mind Tony Romo. I like Tony Romo. He can kind of be a little bit weird sometimes, and I think for him, what made him good at first was that he would basically tell everybody, yeah, the ball's gonna go right here. And then I'm pretty sure all the executives at CBS were saying, hey, we can't have you giving away the plays. So I think he had to adjust to that. And some people say he's worse and he's terrible now, but I don't really see much of a difference. I don't mind Tony Romo either. So this is a hot take that I agree with on both accounts. Bill Walton would have been the best center of all time if he stayed healthy. Best, not greatest. Yeah, I disagree with that. I think that even if Bill Walton had stayed healthy, he wouldn't be better than Nikola Jokic. And to me, based on everything I've heard about Bill Walton, was that he was an amazing passer, he was a great rebounder. Basically Jokic, except Jokic could score and does score so much better than Walton. And that's not even talking about Shaq or Hakeem or Wilt or like any of these other guys. But if Bill Walton had stayed healthy, I absolutely do think that he would have been in that same discussion with guys like Wilt and Russell and Shaq and Hakeem, and maybe more in the David Robinson tier, but definitely somewhere between the holy grail of centers and that David Robinson tier. I think he definitely would have been in there. But at the same time, I will say this about Bill Walton. I don't think any player in NBA history has gotten more mileage out of a great season and a half than Bill Walton has or did for his 1977 playoff run and his 1978 MVP season, where he missed, I think, 24 games, which is the most I think any MVP's ever missed in a full season. It seems like those 2 years and the year he was with Boston as a six-man in '86 when they won it all, those are like the only 2 years or 3 years that people people talk about. And there was a lot of injuries, a lot of time off. He missed, I think, basically 4 years in a row with injuries if you go and you look at his stats page. But anyway, it's sad to see that he's gone now. And I didn't even know he was sick. So he must have, obviously, he was keeping it close to people that he knew and cared about. But yeah, it's very sad to see that he's gone now. But he was certainly a great player, and it's a shame that he wasn't able to stay healthier. Rest in peace, Big Red. 2017 Cavs would have beaten most championship teams pre-2012. They were that good. Fortunately, one team was just better. I would say the 2017 Cavs would beat, forget pre-2012, I think they would beat a lot of teams post-KD Warriors. They would beat all these post-KD Warriors teams too. It's just that, unfortunately, the KD Warriors were an abomination and this outlier of history, and all thanks to a fluke cap spike and Kevin Durant being a bitch and a whole bunch of stuff. Like, this is, I don't want to make the answers to these questions too long. People might lose interest, but this is when I talk about Steph Curry being like the luckiest player ever. One of the reasons why the Warriors were able to sign Durant in 2017, besides the cap spike and besides Durant's own insecurity, was that when Steph Curry signed his contract in 2012, he was severely injured, he had injury-prone label, so they paid him like way below his market value. So then he stays healthy and he goes on and he becomes this all-time great player. So what that did was you had Steph being way underpaid, which again gave them even more cap space because they were paying 2016 Steph like he was 2012 Steph. The Warriors were. So even Steph's early career injuries ended up helping him down the line. So that's just another rant. But when it comes to the 2017 Cavs, yes, I think that they would have beaten a lot of teams, basically every team besides the KD Warriors and the 2018 Warriors. You know, they were a great offensive team, probably the best team of LeBron's career, but it's just a shame that it ended with nothing to show for it. But that's why being a LeBron fan is the toughest job in the world, but somehow I get through with it because I'm a hero. 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the best horror movie of all time. My initial reaction was to disagree with you, and then I started to think about it, and I said, well, I don't know if I think it's the best horror movie of all time. I can think of even something from 1974, Black Christmas is an all-time great horror movie. Everybody who's followed me for a long time knows that I'm a big Michael Myers stan, Halloween fan. I still think that might be better. You got like The Exorcist. There's a ton I wouldn't say there's a ton, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I will say this about it. Every time I watch that fucking movie, I need to go take a shower because I feel like I'm literally there in the movie. It's so grimy and dirty, and that's because the conditions on the set, if you've ever seen any documentaries about it, if you're watching it and it really looked gritty and dirty and like it was a really shitty place to be, that's because it was like 100+ degree heat. Everybody was sweating, like they had actual animal bones and stuff. Like it was really, really just a brutal production, and you could tell through the screen, like you really, really felt like you were there. Just the visceral way that it looked, I felt like it certainly lived up to its name, which I always found hilarious. Like I wish most movies were that direct in terms of what their movie's about. There's no false marketing, there's no false advertising here. When you watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you're going to see people get massacred in the state of Texas with a chainsaw, okay? Now, I would have felt like it would have been hilarious if the producers and directors trolled everybody, and instead of being a movie about people being brutally murdered by a guy wearing people's skin, it was a movie about like adorable puppies or something. That would have been an all-time troll. But anyway, yes, I disagree with this hot take, but at the same time, I can see where you're coming from. Paolo Banchero will finish his career as a top 15 player of all time at the least. Are you referring to top 15 player ever just for the Magic or in history? Because there's absolutely zero fucking way that Banchero is going to be a top 15 player ever by the time he's done playing. I want to know how much marijuana you consumed before you made this post. Or you know what? Better yet, maybe I don't want to know. Ty Cobb is the true GOAT of baseball. Man played his whole career in the dead ball era. I disagree with this. I believe that Barry Bonds, we Barrys have to stick together. Barry Bonds, and I know, he did steroids, blah, 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 allegedly. Barry Bonds is the greatest baseball player of all time. If you were there and you saw him and watched him from 2001 to 2004, it's not even a discussion. He literally broke the game. Teams would rather walk the bases loaded with him at bat than him actually pitch to him. Teams did not pitch to this guy. I always like this. Here's a stat for you for the road, okay? Mike Trout, who is one of the greatest baseball players of all time, in his career has 120 intentional walks. Barry Bonds, just in 2004, had 120 intentional walks. That's all I gotta say. Steroids or not, that's fucking unbelievable. But Ty Cobb was a great player. And if not Barry Bonds, then Babe Ruth would be my second choice. Super Bowl 55, where the Chiefs got blown out by the Bucks. I think you mean Tom Brady, sir. Was Mahomes' second best Super Bowl performance, only behind Super Bowl 57. Played on a bad toe, blah, 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 blah. I gotta admit, I have nothing against Patrick Mahomes, and people know this. I'm a Mahomes fan. In a way, if my Eagles can't win, my second greatest outcome every year is watching Mahomes win because he gets closer to Brady and knocking taking Brady off that GOAT pedestal, at least in the eyes of many people. So when I say this, I don't say this from a place of hatred, but I think it makes Mahomes fans look unbelievably fucking stupid when they say he played great in Super Bowl 55. At a certain point, you just gotta admit that he didn't play that great, and that's okay. I know he had a couple almost great completions, but we're talking about incompletions here, people. I watched that entire game. Mahomes did not play great. I know he had a bad toe. I know his receivers might have dropped a couple passes, but it was not a great performance. And I feel like that's just confirmation bias from people to say, oh, well, see, even in a loss, even in a defeat, put up 9 points, dude. Like, he lost 31-9, and he did it against Brady. Now, I know maybe I just hate Brady so much that anybody who has helped him win a Super Bowl kind of gets me revved up a bit, but I'm sorry, I can't say that a guy who didn't score any touchdowns, threw 2 picks, had a terrible passer rating, even if his offensive line was trash, even if his receivers dropped some passes, I'm not going to sit here and post bail for it. I just can't do it. So I disagree. I would say his second best Super Bowl performance would be this past year against 49ers. Drew Brees is the 4th greatest quarterback of all time behind Brady, Mahomes, and Montana. I would think that there are a lot of other quarterbacks that are, at this point, I would say that those 3 that you mentioned, Brady, Mahomes, Montana, are kind of the consensus. Some people might be, oh, well, it's too early to put Mahomes in there. I'm not one of those. I think Mahomes is easily top 3, probably top 2 at this point. Drew Brees, though, I don't know if he's the 4th greatest quarterback of all time. He's in that discussion. He's in the same realm. Well, let's look at this. You got Peyton, you got Steve Young, you got Dan Marino, you got a guy like Johnny Unitas as a throwback. The old heads are obviously always going to say, well, John Elway, blah, blah, blah. I feel like personally Brees is in that mix, but I think Peyton was better than Brees. I think that Marino is better than Brees. I would say Brees is the top 6. I would say he's like 6th or 7th, not 4. But it's all semantics, really, at a certain point. And really, at this point, I feel like Brady, Mahomes, and Montana, with all their postseason success and Super Bowl MVPs, have kind of solidified themselves as a top 3, and everybody else after that. And also Aaron Rodgers, forgot Aaron Rodgers, not as one of the top 3, but just another guy where Brees is in that tier that he's competing with. I would say Rodgers is also better than Brees as well, at least at his best, but that's debatable. But I would say Brees is about the 6th or the 7th as opposed to the 4th best quarterback of all time. If you win an MVP, you should automatically be qualified for the Hall of Fame. I think this is one of those rules where it stands to reason that if you win an MVP, you're probably going to get into the Hall of Fame anyway, because if you're good enough to win an MVP, then you're good enough to be a Hall of Famer most likely. But I do think there are certain circumstances, like in baseball, there are plenty of MVPs that didn't even make the Hall of Fame or come close to the Hall of Fame. Some guys have won multiple MVPs and aren't in the Hall of Fame. Basketball, Derrick Rose is the only MVP winner I think that won't get into the Hall of Fame, even though the Basketball Hall of Fame, their standards are so unbelievably low. And I think it would be the right decision because he really only had 1.5 great seasons before his injuries took over. And unlike Walton, who had a championship and a finals MVP to fall back on, Rose doesn't have any of that. So I don't think Derrick Rose is a Hall of Famer. And so I don't think if you win an MVP, you should automatically be put in the Hall of Fame, because at the end of the day, it still is just 1 year out of your career. Only correct way to play the quarterback position is as a field general pocket passer. Quarterbacks who are overly athletic or have exceptional arm talent, Allen, Lamar, Mahomes is in there. You know Mahomes has 3 rings, right? Herbert used it as a crutch to compensate for a lack of good decision-making and game processing. Again, I was with you to a point, and then you mentioned Mahomes, which makes no sense. But here's the deal. If you look at all the quarterbacks in history of the league that have, 3 Super Bowl rings, you look at Brady, Montana, Bradshaw, Mahomes, Aikman, okay? You can go back a little bit further if you want to look at just NFL championships. Bart Starr had 5. Like, Brady was a pocket passer. Montana was not, like, people think because Montana was a scrawny white guy that he was this pocket passer. Montana ran the ball. He could scramble. So this idea that Montana was just like a straight up pocket passer, not true, by the way. Aikman was a pocket passer. Bradshaw was another guy he was athletic, had a rocket arm. The one constant, Mahomes is the biggest opposition to your point because he scrambles all the time, as we see, and he is anything but a textbook pocket passer. The one thing all these guys had, doesn't matter what era, the one thing that they all had in common that helped them win championships was elite defenses. And that's really, with the exception of maybe Mahomes' first couple of rings. But this past season, Mahomes and the Chiefs won largely because they had an elite defense. You look at the defenses in all the years the other quarterbacks won. Don't win Super Bowls in the NFL unless your defense is either elite or clutch or both, okay? That's it. Quarterbacks with the most rings had the most elite defenses. That's it. So I don't know if it's necessarily a field general or pocket passer that determines that you're going to have a more successful career, or that maybe you'll have a longer career than guys who scramble a lot. I don't know, but I tend to disagree with that. I think that the most common denominator is a great defense, and a great defense is a quarterback's best friend. So defense is the main determination of how many Super Super Bowls, the quarterback wins. Fumbling the ball out of the end zone equals a touchback is a perfectly fine rule, and it always has been. This one really stirs a lot of debate. I tend to think, you know what, the offense in today's NFL already gets so many advantages that there's a rule like this that actually hurts them. In a way, I like that, but in the other sense, I feel like it bails out the defense. You're bailing out the defense who allowed an offense to drive all the way down the field on you. Here's what I think personally, what I think should happen is, I feel like if somebody fumbles the ball out of the end zone for a touchback, they should have to restart the drive at their own 20-yard line. And, you know, that's just my opinion. That's what I think they should do. So I don't agree with your hot take fully, but I do think it could be tweaked or modified a bit to where both parties, some people who say, well, it's a cheap way, it bails out the defense, and then other people who say, well, you need to take better care of the ball. This way, if you give the team who fumbled the ball out of the end zone the ball back at their own 20, then, you know, I think that's a good middle ground. Current NHL hockey is a rougher sport than current NFL football. No, because football, there's still people being tackled. There's violence every single play. Even if it's not a tackle or whatever, you got people at the offensive, defensive lines of scrimmage going at each other's throats. Hockey, it's not what it used to be. And honestly, I don't think anybody really gives a shit. I think, honestly, one of the biggest issues with hockey is the fact that, if anything, it's too congested and it's not free enough. There's too many people, you know, in one spot, and there's too many shots to get blocked. This is just me ranting on hockey. This is why I'm not a bigger hockey fan than I maybe should be, is because there's too many possessions that get thwarted and knocked off balance because it feels too congested. The ice feels too congested. I think hockey would be so much more free-flowing and more entertaining to watch. Each team had one fewer person on the ice. So I disagree with your hot take. That's the main point here. Miller Lite is the best beer. Honestly, when you're sober and you're thinking about what am I going to do tonight going out for a drink, any sort of beer, it tastes like piss. If I'm going to have a beer, though, I'm going to have some sort of IPA because it hits harder and I might as well get my money's worth. For me, I happen to be a rum and Coke man or a rum and Diet Pepsi person, whoever, soda, rum and soda, whatever. That's my go-to. If I had to pick a choice for beer, and this sounds kind of weird, but in my entire experience, I'm not a huge drinker, but I drink every now and then. My experience, the smoothest tasting beer I ever had was Keystone Light, and that's a God's honest truth. So I disagree with Miller Lite being the best beer. Miller Lite tastes like piss, but in fairness, so does a lot of beer. Steve Nash deserved both of his MVPs. Let's see what the umpire has to say about that.
We, unfortunately, my goodness.
Bryce Young will lead the league in passing yards. Are you talking about on Madden? Because there's no fucking way he's going to lead the real-life NFL in passing yards in 2024. There's just no way. I'm sorry. He stinks. I know I've been wrong before on a lot of things, but this one, I will literally bet my entire YouTube channel that he will not do it. If Bryce Young leads the league in passing yards in 2024, I will literally deactivate my YouTube channel. That's how strong and convicted I am. He will not do it. Daniel Jones will win Comeback Player of the Year. Yeah, well, it certainly is not a very high bar for him to clear in terms of being better than he was last year. Daniel Jones is terrible. He stinks. He had 1 year where people realized, oh, he's white and he can run, and Brian Dable and those guys used that to their advantage because defenses didn't respect it. And then once defenses caught up to him again last year, like, hey, we know you can run, so don't worry about it, he went back to being dog shit. The Giants went back to being a dumpster fire of an organization. So no, Daniel Jones is not going to be Comeback Player of the Year. I strongly disagree. I doubt he'll even last to the end of the season before he gets replaced by Drew Lock. Karl Anthony Towns is a bust. 4-time All-Star, 1 conference finals appearance, Rookie of the Year. Is that all he has to be hyped up for after an 8-year career? Now he's a second option likely for the rest of his time, while also calling himself the best shooting big man ever. I wouldn't go so far as to say that Karl Anthony Towns is a bust. I would say he is an underachiever. I do think that you don't have the production he's had throughout his career, you are a bust. But again, at one point there was a survey back when he was going into his second year where people were saying they would take him over anybody else in the league, over LeBron, over Durant, over Steph, anybody, that he was going to be the future of the league, and obviously that did not turn out that way. His career has been disappointing, especially in his postseason career. He seems to just not have a very high IQ, and I know the best shooting big man ever comment that he had ticked a lot of people off, but statistically that might be one of the few things he said where he actually might have some merit to it, so I don't really get that mad about that, but in a way it kind of leans into why he's even more of an underachiever. It's because, oh, you have the ability to shoot so well for a guy that size, what exactly is missing here? And yeah, he's obviously going to be Anthony Edwards' sidekick as long as he remains in Minnesota. But if I was Minnesota, I would try to trade him and see what I could get for him, because he's just not a good postseason performer. We have enough evidence of that now. Luka Doncic is more closer to Michael Jordan than anyone playing currently. Are you talking about in terms of like friendship? They're really close, because there's a guy named LeBron James who's better than Michael Jordan that's still playing. So yeah, we all know Michael Jordan doesn't like LeBron personally. Those two don't get along with each other, and that tells you all you need to know about what Michael thinks of LeBron as a threat to his throne as the GOAT. A few years after Jimmy Butler retires, he will become a name that you rarely hear but think of good things when you hear of him, similar to someone like a T.Y. Hilton or A.J. Green. I disagree profoundly with this. Jimmy Butler to me seems like a massive attention whore. He's already in a bunch of commercials, and I don't think that's going to change. I'm sure that he'll get picked up by some media empire somewhere and become an analyst and give his thoughts on things. So I don't think whenever Jimmy Butler is done playing, we'll hear the last of him. I think if you talk about players completely disappearing off the map when they're done playing, I think that's Kawhi. But Jimmy Butler, I think, would actually be one of the more likely players to look into a media career. So I disagree with this. Candy corn is a top tier candy. I 100% agree with this, and I honestly don't understand why so many people hate candy corn, but I swear to God, I could just eat an entire bag of candy corn in one sitting, even though it would have like 3 days worth of sugar for me. It just, god damn it, it's so fucking good. I don't know why. My taste buds are just attuned to it, but god, it's so fucking good. And I know that people are gonna hate on it because they're miserable with their own lives. If you hate candy corn, that's a deal breaker for me. I'm sorry. Candy corn is a top tier candy. It might be the best candy if I go that far. If my Bengals drafted Mahomes at 9 instead of John Ross, schmuck, we probably would have ruined him as a quarterback, and he'd sign a second contract as a bench bridge quarterback somewhere else. Look, I understand if people want to say that going to the Chiefs helped Mahomes a bit because Andy Reid and he had some good schemes and everything, but Mahomes is the reason the Chiefs are the Chiefs. Okay, he's the catalyst there. Okay, so this idea that if he was drafted by anybody else, especially the Bengals, it's like that he would have been a scrub. It's no. Mahomes is an ultra rare talent. He's one of the ultra rare best quarterbacks ever, and he would have been drafted anywhere he could have been drafted. He's one of the few guys I would say would have been successful if he was drafted with the Jets and the Giants. Would he be as successful as he's been with the Chiefs? Maybe not, probably not, but he still would be a good quarterback regardless. He's situation proof, which is basically the highest honor you give to a quarterback when you talk about them, in the sense that no matter what situation, no matter what team you put them on, they're going to produce, and that's what Mahomes is. So I disagree with this, and I think Mahomes would have had the Bengals in a Super Bowl or in multiple Super Bowls and won a Super Bowl by now, unlike Joe Burrow, their current quarterback. Ricky Henderson is the MLB GOAT and Barry Sanders is the NFL GOAT. Both had the most talent of all time and displayed it as such. I know that Ricky Henderson is considered by a lot of people to be the greatest leadoff man of all time, leadoff hitter, which he was, especially Ricky. He considers himself that. Just ask him. But no, Barry Bonds, Babe Ruth, there's Willie Mays, Hank Aaron. You got a lot of guys that I would put before Ricky Henderson as the best baseball player ever. Barry Sanders, NFL, football, a little bit different because of the positions. I still think to this day Jerry Rice is the best football player of all time because he completely destroys everybody numbers wise, and he did it for, really, numbers were a thing for receivers, or at least in a much less receiver friendly era than he did it, and he did it for so long. He was doing it into his 40s at a high level. That's something no other receiver's ever done. So Jerry Rice is my NFL football GOAT. At least if you want it to be offense, I don't know. Defensively, it'd probably be Reggie White battling with Lawrence Taylor and Aaron Donald. But I would say if I had to pick one person as the NFL GOAT, I would say, regardless of position, I would say Jerry Rice. Joel Embiid is the least deserving MVP winner in the 21st century. He was pretty undeserving, but I believe that the most undeserving MVP winner in the 21st century was 2006 Steve Nash. Now, people can talk all they want about his 2005 award being fraudulent as well, but at least I could see some sort of the argument for that year because he turned the Suns around from an afterthought into a contender. But in 2006, yeah, I mean, there's just no argument. He was not the most valuable player that year. I have no fucking idea how he won it that year. I mean, there was scores of other guys that had better arguments. As a LeBron fan, it's another MVP that I feel LeBron was robbed of. Kobe fans obviously point to 2006 as the year he was robbed of. Analytically, he wasn't even the best player on his own fucking team. Sean Marion was. Can't forget about Dirk and Chauncey Billups and Dwayne Wade. Even Elton Brand had better numbers than Steve Nash did for the Los Angeles Clippers before the Clippers were perennially good. So yeah, I think that Steve Nash 2006 is the worst MVP winner of the 21st century, and it might be one of the bottom 5 MVP winners ever, to be honest with you. If Rodgers joined the Brady Pats stats from 04 to 19, he would have 2 Super Bowls max. I mean, I've come around a little bit on the Aaron Rodgers playoff choker shit, but I have to reiterate, people, that just because the Patriots struggled after Brady left does not mean that during those dynasty years when those teams were loaded, that if you put Aaron Rodgers in there, that he would have been able to win multiple championships, because he would have. There's no question in my mind. You put Rodgers, Breeze, Peyton, put Mahomes there in place of Brady on those 04 to 2019, whatever Patriots teams, when they had those defenses and that weak division and those special teams and all the advantages built in that Brady had, yes, they are all going to win multiple championships. There's no doubt in my mind, even if they stunk in the playoffs. You know how I know that? Because Brady stunk in the playoffs most of the time. And also, they technically, from the time Tom Brady became the starter in week 3 of 2001 to the time he left the Patriots after the 2019 season, Patriots played 19 games without him, and they went 13-6, and that's not including the game where he actually tore his ACL, where he left early in the first quarter and they won. So it was really more like a 14-6 record. That's 70% of the time the dynasty era Patriots won without Tom Brady. They went 14-6 without Tom Brady. I know what I saw. It got Matt Castle paid. It got Jimmy Garoppolo paid. Okay, I know what I saw. So I disagree heavily. I think that there were a lot of other quarterbacks from that era who could have come close to or replicated what Brady did for the Patriots in those years. And finally, the Seahawks made the right decision by throwing the ball. Statistically that year, Marshawn hadn't been great. Running the ball from that close to scoring a touchdown still pisses me off they didn't run it, but what are you going to do? This is just massive fucking copium. I'm telling you this as somebody who literally watched it in real time. Not a single person thought Marshawn Lynch was not getting the ball. Not a single person thought Seattle was not going to score by handing the ball to Marshawn Lynch on that drive. You know why? Because they literally fucking did it already in that game. Like, so all these things, oh, well, statistically, Marshawn wasn't that great, blah, blah. Who gives a fuck? I don't fucking care, dude. They literally did it in that game early in the Super Bowl. Marshawn Lynch had like a 3-yard rushing touchdown on the goal line. So this whole shit is like massive copium. Like, oh, it really wasn't that good in the goal line situations. No, it was a fucking stupid, terrible. It was one of the worst play calls ever, okay? And it was one of the biggest choke jobs ever. And of course, it benefited that fucking bitch Tom Brady. And another reason why I hated watching the NFL, or I hate watching the NFL in the playoffs for a good portion of a decade, because teams just continued to find ways to bail out Tom Brady. And this was a great example of it. So no, I don't want to hear anything about, oh, well, it was actually the right decision to throw. No, it wasn't. Give the ball to Marshawn Lynch. If you give the ball to Marshawn Lynch 3 times and you still don't score, you know what? I can live with that. But no, you fucking throw a route into the teeth of the defense where the defender can jump the ball, which is what Malcolm Butler did, and then you lose the Super Bowl. Great job, guys.